Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today, we are going to begin the study of the book of the prophet Habbakuk, or Habakkuk. The name Habakkuk is usually understood to mean the name embrace from the Hebrew word lechabek, to embrace, presumably someone who either embraces God or was embraced by God. Habakkuk follows the book of Nahum. The book of Nahum, just a little bit of history so that we understand the placement of Nahum and the placement of Habakkuk after that, and so that we can understand Habakkuk and his prophecies in the proper historical context. Until now, most of the prophets we have been studying, the Assyrian kingdom was the big empire of the day, the most powerful one, and the one that was the biggest enemy of the people of Judea and the northern kingdom of Israel. However, in the year 612 BCE, that's 612 minus 0, so as we go forward in history, it goes from 612 to 611, etc. The Babylonian kingdom conquered the Assyrian kingdom. Some remnants of the Assyrian kingdom remained for a couple years after that, and then several years later, in the famous Battle of Carchemish, the remnants of the Assyrian kingdom were destroyed. This ascendency of the Babylonian kingdom over the Assyrian kingdom happened during the reign of the king Yoshiyahu, who was known as a righteous king of Judah, and this happened after the northern kingdom had already been destroyed. So Nahum, when Nahum prophesied, he was prophesying the destruction of the Assyrian kingdom, which then actually came about. His prophecy was realized when the Babylonians destroyed the Assyrian kingdom. So Nahum was during the reign of the king Manasseh, who was a vassal to Assyria. This was before the destruction of Assyria. Manasseh was succeeded by his son Ammon, who was only king for a short amount of time, and then after that Yoshiyahu, who was king for 31 years. During the reign of Yoshiyahu, this saw the end of the Assyrian kingdom around 612, like I mentioned, and then Yoshiyahu himself was killed in the Battle of Megiddo, where the Egyptians were marching through the land of Israel in order to help in the fight against the remnants of the Assyrian kingdom. So, and that happened in 609, so several years after the Babylonians conquered the bulk of the Assyrian empire. So Habakkuk is now prophesying during the reign of Yoshiyahu, because he is talking about the time when the Assyrian empire was gone, and it was now the Babylonian empire that was marching around the Middle East, conquering territory and so on, becoming the new empire. So the big enemy in the time of Habakkuk and the prophet that we're about to read is the empire of Babylon. Now, the tradition has it that Habakkuk said his prophecies during the time of Manasseh, which doesn't make sense according to what I just told you. However, if that is the case, and when I say tradition, I mean the rabbinic tradition is such, if that is the case, it is certainly possible that he began his prophetic career during the time of Manasseh and continued to be a prophet until and through the time of Yoshiyahu, when he saw the Babylonian kingdom rise. So if that's the case, then he must have been a prophet for a significant period of time, probably around 50 or 60 years, which is certainly not impossible at all. We've seen similar things with some of the other prophets as well. Now that we established this time period, I also want to mention there are other various traditions, other religions. The Christians and the Islamic traditions have placed him a lot later, during the time of Daniel, which was a time when the Babylonian kingdom was high. So we'd be talking about after the destruction of the first temple, during the time of exile, or during the early days of the second temple, and so on. But I'm going with the rabbinic tradition that I mentioned before. I just want to mention that there's a lot of other ways, there's a lot of other traditions about when he existed and when he said his prophecies. Nonetheless, it is clear that his prophecies are directed against Babylon, and it is assumed, for various reasons, that his location is standing in Jerusalem, and he is speaking from that vantage point, speaking to the people of Jerusalem regarding the Babylonians. Now let us begin the book of Habakkuk. Let's start chapter 1. It starts with the familiar term, Hamasa, the burden, Asher Chazah, that was seen by Habakkuk Hanavi, by the prophet Habakkuk. Again, we use the term burden, and in this case, the term burden is very appropriate for what we're about to read, which you'll understand, because there's something that really, really weighed heavily on Habakkuk. One of the things that we're going to see in these 3 chapters of this short book, that one of the things that Habakkuk is famous for is his style of challenging God, of questioning God in almost a combative way, showing that it is appropriate under the right circumstances for someone to question God's judgment, as long as one understands that God's judgment is something that we don't understand and have to accept. Habakkuk begins in verse 2 with his vision, which actually sounds, in this case, more like a burden than a vision. Ad ona, but if we imagine he's addressing God himself. Ad ona Adonai shivati velo tishma. How long, God, am I going to cry out and you not listen? Ez ak elecha, and I'm going to cry out to you. Hamas, there is Hamas. There is. I'm going to translate now Hamas as violence, but Hamas means specifically violence where people forcibly oppress others, take possessions from other people forcibly without a due process, without righteous endeavors, without mercy. Velo toshia, and you do not save. Now there's 2 ways to understand what Hamas is he referring to here. One way to understand, and most of the traditional commentaries understand, that he's talking about the Hamas, the violence that's being perpetrated by the Babylonians upon the kingdoms that the Babylonians are conquering, including, of course, the people of Judah. However, I think, and this is another way to understand this, is he's talking about and the things that he sees himself, the Hamas that he sees, as we've seen throughout the prophets until now. They were always referring to the corruption that existed within the people of Judah, within the people of Israel. Their primary goal and aim was to ethically improve and morally improve the people to whom they were preaching. So I think that this can also be seen, and I kind of would rather read it this way, it just seems to make more sense, that what he's talking about is the Hamas that he sees in the people around him, the corruption that he sees around him. And he's saying, I'm trying to do things, but it doesn't help. People don't listen. And I cry out to you, God, and you don't listen. You don't make anything better. And at this point, Habakkuk is thinking, how would God make it better? By striking down those perpetrators of this corruption. And he says, Lama tar'eni oven v'omol tabit. Why do you show me sinning and iniquity? Why do you show me all this evil? Why do you show me all of this wrong? And you look at it and you see it. V'shod v'chamas l'negdi. And this ravaging, this rampaging, and this oppression is sitting right in front of me. See, he seems to be talking about what's happening in the city in front of him. Vayehi riv, and there is arguments, and people don't get along with each other. Umadon, and there's constant madon is contention, but it means contention between people, usually in courts, people are constantly arguing and fighting with each other. This doesn't sound to me like a ravaging conqueror. This sounds to me his commentary on the society around him. Umadon Yisa, and you carry it, and you don't do anything. In other words, he's asking God, like all of us so many times do. We look around us and see so much corruption in the society, and we say, God, why do you allow it to happen? Why don't you just strike down the bad guys? Get rid of them and let the good guys flourish. We're asking God, why don't you intervene in human affairs? And then the next question in verse 4 is the question that we always say. It's, why is it that people don't believe in you, God? Why don't they keep the Torah? Why don't they keep the laws that you, God, gave us so that we could live a moral life? Because they look around you and they see that the bad people are prospering and the good people are not. Al-Kain Tofug Torah. This is why the Torah, this is why your teachings, God, are weak. They're not being kept. V'lo yetzei lo netzach mishpat. And this is why true justice does not prevail. Justice does not prevail because you don't intervene. Ki rasha machtir et hatzadik. Again, this is another reference that hints to me that he's talking at this section about the corruption of the society. He's talking about an evil person, machtir et hatzadik. He captures the righteous person. He surrounds him with obstacles and blocks. Al-Kain yetzei mishpat mu'kal. This is why justice comes out twisted. The justice system in our society, he's saying, is corrupt, is messed up. The good are getting persecuted. The bad, the evil are winning. This is why people aren't listening to you, God. Why don't you do something? Now, this is the ultimate question that we all have and we all have to deal with in our lives all the time. However, unfortunately, when God's justice does come, sometimes it comes in ways that we don't really want. And this is a lesson that Habakkuk is about to learn. Because God doesn't really answer the question right now as to why he doesn't intervene more in human affairs and make it more fair. Presumably it's because, I'm not answering the question of theodicy, of course, right now, but I am saying that God wants us to fix it. He is not going to fix it. And if a society is corrupt, he will destroy the society, but not in the way that we want. And this is what Habakkuk is about to learn. And here's what God says, Re'u v'goyim. You guys are worried that your society is corrupt and evil. Look out among the nations, v'habitu, and see, v'hitamhu tumo, and you will be in wonder and amazed. This is not a good kind of wonder and amaze. This is a terror, a frightful amazement. Ki po'al po'el b'mechem. There is something happening in your days. Lo ta'aminu, something that you're not even going to believe. It's unbelievable. Ki supar. You wouldn't even believe it if somebody told it to you. So therefore, look, God says, Re'u, see, because if I just told you, you wouldn't believe it. Reminds of the stories you hear about how during the early days of Nazi Germany, how people kept on thinking, no, it can't possibly be what I'm hearing about them is really true. It can't possibly be. So you have to go look for yourself and see the evidence in order to be convinced that it really is as bad as I'm saying. Because what am I doing? God says, because I am going to establish the called Chaldeans, who are Kastim, who are allies and part of the Babylonian Empire. Hagoy Hamarvi Hanimhar, this bitter and Nimhar means they're quick to judgment. They don't think about what they're doing. They just rush and do. That nation. Haholech Limarchavi Arts. They are now marching across the breadth of the land, Lareshet Mishkanos Lolo, to go and conquer and take over places and countries that are not really his. So he is coming, and yeah, you're right, you're corrupt, but your punishment is going to come through the hands of the Babylonians who are coming. Oyom v'norahu, they are fearful, frightful, and terrifying. Mimenu mishpato usei so yetzei. From himself, his own laws, he makes up his own justice, and he makes up his own rules, his own way of going about things. If we look at I would like to compare to Isaiah chapter 10. We see there how God says, Isaiah there is referring to the Assyrians, the previous oppressors, and God said to them, they were Ashur Shevet Api. They are the wrath of my anger, the rod of my anger. In other words, Ashur was given ascendency because I was angry. I wanted to punish people, all other people, specifically Judah in that case and Israel. But they were my Shevet Api, because they. And however, what did they do? They ended up this is verse 7. So if he didn't think when he did it that he was doing it by punishment, but rather he went he just wanted to destroy and just destroy nations. So in other words, but had he thought, then he would have understood that he's only he's allowed to conquer, he can subjugate those people, but to destroy and cut and destroy and do and make suffer and torture and so on, that's not his right. So he went beyond that, and therefore Ashur became destroyed. And like we saw in the book of Nahum, that because of Assyria's behavior, they ended up getting destroyed. Now Babylon, Habbakuk is saying over here, and God is saying over here, they are Amar v'hanimhar, they are quick to judgment, because they are and they're just rushing, they're not thinking. And because they're not thinking, right, they're doing like the Assyrians did. They're just going out and destroying. Yes, I am sending them. Yes, I am allowing them to do it because I want the people punished, but they on their own are perpetrating destruction way beyond what they should do. And that's why it says, he's making up his own judgment. He's making up his own laws. I'm allowing them to happen. However, he's still the one that's making those decisions. This is very important to make this comparison and understand that Habakkuk is drawing the same lesson that Yeshayahu and Nahum were trying to teach us as well, but applying it in a new historical context. And now God continues to describe the Babylonian conquerors. V'kalu min merim susav, their horses are swifter, are lighter than leopards. V'chadu mize'evei erav, and they are sharper or swifter than the wolves of the night. Zevei Arab also can mean the wolves of the wilderness. Ufashu parashav, and and his horses and his chariots are so many. Ufarashav merachok yavo, when they come from far away, yaufu, they fly kinesher like eagles, chash le'achol, that are in a rush to eat. Kulo lechamas yavo, why is he coming for Hamas, to perpetrate violence? Megamas p'nehem kadima, they're always looking forward. The same idea, they're not thinking about what they're doing, they're just rushing forward into plunder. Vayasov kachol shevi, and they are gathering captives like so many, like the sand of the sea. And he laughs at the kings that he's conquering. He laughs at the veroznim michaklo, and the officers and princes of the nations he conquers, they're like toys to him. Even the fortified cities, he just laughs at them. He gathers up dirt. Presumably this means he builds a siege ramp, and then he rushes right over the wall and captures the city. It's like nothing to him. Oz cholaf ruach vayavor v'ashem. Then after conquering the city, they pass just like the wind blows by, and they do all of their ashem, they do all of their sins, and they do all of their terrible torture to the people they conquer. Zu kochol leloho, and he gives credit to his God. This is how God describes what Babylon is doing. Yes, punishment is coming, but again, it is the people, even the people that are punishing, that they decide to carry that punishment way beyond what God is giving them the right or ability, not ability, but the right to do. I'm going to stop here in the middle of the chapter 1. This will be Habakkuk 1a. And soon we're going to see the answer that Habakkuk has to God and how he responds to this. Remember, what he started with was asking God for justice and righteousness within his city. But God is basically telling him that's something for the people to do. And God says, yes, I am going to allow the Babylonians to destroy this very corrupt society. But what the Babylonians are going to do is going to be awful and horrible. So be careful what you ask for. Next Habakkuk in 1b, which we're going to learn next, is going to say, God, oh no. Watch out, I don't want that. That's going to be terrible. We don't want to see such horrible suffering like that, such indiscriminate suffering. Thank you so much for studying together with us. Looking forward to studying Habakkuk 1b with you as well.